welcome to Life Support Live, the weekly live show that explores how Star Trek can help us to boldly go in our own lives to better ourselves and the rest of humanity.
I believe a famous starship captain once said that. And now that I'm thinking about it, another famous starship captain also said, wherever our mission takes us, crew, we'll try to have a little fun along the way.
Welcome. I might be wearing one of the badges of one of those famous captains.
You just might be. You might be a badge wearer if.
You might be a badge wearer if your name is Dr. Mattu. I am a clinical psychologist. Welcome, everyone. And who are you?
I'm Dr. Trek, Larry Nemecek. Hey, one of us is a real doctor.
We'll leave it to you to figure out who that might be. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Life Support Live. We're sorry for a little bit of a delayed start. That is all my fault. Larry, today we are talking about measuring intelligence, episodes that have stories and episodes of movies that have dealt with topics of intelligence, who is and who's not, and how we measure it, how we determine that. But before we get to that, Larry, what is this enterprise we were on of Life Support Live?
I don't know. Oh, wait. I'm sorry. We're measuring intelligence. Listen. This is Life Support Live, everybody. We have been at this for over a year now, started in the pandemic. Welcome if you're a newcomer, and welcome back, of course, if you're one of the lifers in the community. Jump in the chat there. Hey, we are here to boldly go through uncertain times. And you know what, Ali, just about the time I thought things were getting less uncertain, they're more uncertainter here. But hey, you're in a good space. You're in a good place with us here for at least another, couple hours or so. We're going to geek out here on Star Trek and hopefully get across some good points to help you in daily life.
Yeah, a lot of uncertainty this week. But you know what was not uncertain, Larry, was LeVar Burton hosting Jeopardy. And folks, that is actually the inspiration for this week's, believe it or not. We had a few different ideas, and both the ideas were things happening outside of Star Trek canon, because there's no new canon this week.
This is sounding like $10,000 pyramid. Things that happen in canon, things that happen outside canon, things that go bump in the night, okay. But no. This is Star Trek. This is Life Support Live.
Yeah, and LeVar, I'm hoping his hosting becomes permanent. Who knows what will happen?
Are we just slanted because we live in Trek world, Trekland?
Yes, we are totally biased.
Did any of the other guests? It felt like LeVar got all of this mainstream press buzz. Now, did I just have all my news filters slanted for that, or did he really get as much attention or more as any of the other hosts, or positive feedback?
Larry, I don't even know who else hosted. I have no clue who else was hosting. I'm sure there were some very lovely folks who were hosting. All I know is our favorite engineer, LeVar Burton, Geordi LaForge himself was hosting, and
our favorite flagship engineer of the 24th century.
There you go. Yeah, I was thinking of all the other flagship engineers. Larry, this is a great question actually for you.
You said all the other engineers. That's Scotty. That's B'Elanna. That's O'Brien.
Flagship. All the other flagship.
I was trying to be respectful of everybody else there. Where you just kind of blotted out everybody.
Larry, what? I'm
a doctor, not a linguist. Okay, go ahead.
You were also a historian, which brings me to my next question. What was a flagship before the Enterprise D? Do we know?
No, it was a Stargazer. No, it wasn't.
It was a Stargazer.
No, it wasn't. We don't really know. And until you said that, I don't think 99% of fandom cared.
I don't think I cared.
Because the Enterprise wasn't Kirk's Enterprise wasn't the flagship.
It wasn't the flagship.
They didn't.
No.
They
were just the only ship in the quadrant.
Right.
When disaster struck.
Do you guys have a flag? I think so. Great, you're it.
Yeah. Well, by that measure, Discovery in the future might be a flagship. They have that flag. I think
the measure of the ship. Yes.
Yeah. Who knows? I'm sure someone has the answer. what else was has what other ship has served as a flagship besides the Enterprise D? I'm assuming the E is also the flagship.
Well, was it the Europa at the Battle of the Binaries? Which apparently means 4 stars because a binary is 2 to begin with. Okay, I won't say
Oh,
it.
folks, we have our first soapbox. I'm gonna have to raise my badge, Larry. I don't think it's at regulation lengths. I like this badge. This is
Yeah.
the new fan sets Enterprise
Yes.
USS Enterprise badge from Discovery, and I'd been waiting a long time from a certain other manufacturing company. They never released them. But Fansets just came out with it, and folks, we're not sponsored by them.
Is that a company that might begin with the letter that denotes a certain continuum?
Yes, yes, it is that company. Now it's all crooked, but anyways, they're releasing these magnetic ones now, which I love. So I am very proud.
What do they call? They have a hashtag for that. Something about the delta, the best delta or something. Somebody will know it.
Well, you know what the best Delta is? The best Delta is the newest Delta that you have purchased from your favorite retailer.
Yeah,
You know what the worst Delta is? The one that's infecting a lot of people right now.
Oh, that's right. What a segue, and I didn't even mean for it. Yes.
No, that's a bad Delta. A good Delta is a quadrant you can be stuck in.
Yeah, that quadrant used to have the worst Delta reputation until now.
Yeah. All right, well, we got a show to do, Larry. So inspired.
We got folks chatting away already, and it's good to see everybody. I'm going to do my best once again to keep up better than I have been lately. So
yeah, we will.
Because this is going to be a heavy lift for you today with this theme today.
I think you will be pleasantly surprised by yourself. So a lot of love coming in for LeVar Burton, not only for his performance in Roots, but also what he did with Reading Rainbow.
Mm-hmm.
My wife is actually a huge LeVar Burton fan, not because of Star Trek, but because of Reading Rainbow. When she was a kid, she pretended to be one of those kids that does a report on the book, as you see at the end of Reading Rainbow. So whatever library book she got, she would pretend to be that kid with the whole the music and all that stuff.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, so a lot of multi-generational LeVar Burton fans, I would say. So I hope he gets a gig. But Larry, Jeopardy in the United States, for those of you who are outside the United States and don't know the show Jeopardy, it's like a quiz show where you are given answers and you have to ask the question. So the answer might be...
You have to reply in the form of a question.
You have to reply in the form of a question. So a Star Trek one might be, this quadrant was unexplored by the Federation until...
the caretaker came along.
Yes. And then you would say, what is...
the Delta Quadrant.
The Delta Quadrant. That's how Jeopardy
and
works.
if you blurt out and say, Delta Quadrant, the host hopefully will say, oh, I need that in the form of a question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And if you do that, you probably did not qualify to be on Jeopardy. I
was a kid. I go back to the Art Fleming days. I used to love that with the bongo drums at the beginning.
There was
Do you know
bongo
what I'm talking
drums in Jeopardy?
No, I mean the original theme was not Art Fleming, Don Pardo, right? The great Don Pardo. Something. These people, these 3 and more will compete for cash and prizes on today's Jeopardy. And then it would go, the music was da dum da dum da 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 dum da 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 dum dum da dum dum da dum. And there were some bongo, and they would bring out the contestants. They would bring out the contestants at first, and it would be bongo drums going. And while the guy would say, and this is Mrs. Fran Schmimowitz of Ocean Spray, New Jersey, and she's a homemaker, and da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-dum-dum-dum, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and they would do that while they brought the next person out and do the little introduction, and then the third person would come out, and they would say that. And our returning champion is Mr. Fred Schmolowitz of Ocean Spray, New Jersey also. Ooh, what's going on here? He's silver master cash and prizes of, and it was the 60s, $2,127. All of them will be competing for cash and prizes on today's Jeopardy. And they'd play the theme. And now here's your Jeopardy host, Art Fleming. Well, God, thank you, Don Pardo, and blah 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 blah. Anyway, that was the daytime Jeopardy with the cardboard signs when they would, it was gold on blue, and they would pull the cardboard, and you could hear them go when they would pull the cardboard.
Wow.
Okay, today's history lesson. It's not even a real K3.
That
Loved
that it
Jeopardy.
was not a
So
K3, but that was definitely something. That was
So when
definitely.
when Jeopardy, and it was really weird because when I was in grad school and I was home staying with people back home in between grad school, we were sitting around in the game group I worked in. I hung with Cody and Tim, and um, I had an old somebody said, "Gosh, I wish we could play Jeopardy," and I had an old home version of
Yeah.
Jeopardy.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we wore it out. We played all 60 games or whatever in it. And I swear to God, about a month later, somebody said, "Hey, there's this new game out called Trivial Pursuit." And it was way before it was nationally famous.
Yeah, yeah.
And I said, we were like, "Oh," and so we grabbed it, and then we started playing Trivial Pursuit, and that's when TP got so huge. TP, people would
Toilet
say,
paper. That's when toilet paper really came into
and
had its
yes,
moment.
but the point is, right about that, there must have been something in the water because right about that time is when they brought back Jeopardy with Alex Trebek, young Alex.
Oh, yeah.
It
Yeah.
was like it's really weird. It was like there was something about trivia and the early Reagan administration that people just had to. It was weird.
Almost to say it might have been trivial.
I'm going to shut up now because I've taken all my free time for the entire show. So, intelligence.
Well, we had
Knowing-
one mini soapbox already, and we've also had one tangent, and we've had a few different themes. So Life Support Live is running at full capacity right now.
I'm going to read the chat for a minute and let you talk about
The
intelligence.
dilithium is fully crystallized, Captain. We're firing on all cylinders. All dilithium chambers are fully energized. So, folks, here's what we're doing
So,
today.
answer in the chat if you remember Art Fleming's Jeopardy too. Okay.
Some folks have.
catching-
It was
And you made
Linda.
the bongo drums at the beginning, yeah.
Yeah, Linda said, "Oh wow, now I remember the original theme." So you got something there, Larry.
But they did have the thing that was constant. The one thing that was constant between the two eras was the Final Jeopardy music.
Do 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 do.
Alex's thing. The original, like little flute whistly sound.
Yeah.
Yes, before they jazzed it up. But they used the original recording the first few years of Alex Trebek's, which was it's kind of like Worf coming out with the core thatched, sash.
I love Tim says Dr. Ali with the Pakistani Mr. Scott again. I know. I my Scottish is really bad. It's probably because of how much Pakistanis love bagpipes.
You're just paying homage to Jimmy Doohan's Scottish.
All right. So all right, why are we doing this? Okay. Now, if you come from an area where you haven't seen Jeopardy, you have quiz shows, and you have seen these kind of shows where you have people who come on. They ask very difficult questions of them, and one person is crowned the winner of that. That's your quiz show format, and we often look at those people and think of them as being highly intelligent, and this is one way that we measure intelligence. And so that got us thinking, let's do a topic on this. We have one of our Star Trek greats hosting one of the great quiz shows. And so is there a theme we can dive into related to measuring intelligence? And this is a topic I
How
love.
about measuring intelligence?
How about measuring? Yeah. Is there a topic, Willie? Yeah, well, I think that's the topic, Ollie.
I don't know. Let me look and see. Okay, yeah.
This is a topic I really love talking about because there's so much myth and confusion, and there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of really wild legacy here of history that there's so much stuff for us to explore. But before we get to any of that stuff, Larry, you know what we have to do?
What do we have to do? What do we have to do, Ollie?
We have to try to take over the Alpha Quadrant. No. We're not the founders.
Try take over the Alpha Quadrant.
That's really good, Larry. We got to open up the briefing room. This is the part of the show where we do a deep dive into the Star Trek canon that can guide.
We do have a structure, guys.
We have a structure. Yeah, we don't always follow it, but we got them.
Well,
it's like
it's compression.
It's like the rule of thirds in photography. You got to know the rules before you break the rules, Larry.
Yes.
And we break those rules.
Oh, it's like canon in Star Trek. Okay.
Ha! Hey, Texture.trivia. Get your shirts at T Public, folks. Larry, where would you like to start? I think we might want to start with the greatest story about this, going back to the original series.
Well, see, can I just say something about this?
Please. Folks, we got soapbox number 2 right here.
No. This is just interesting. By the way, I'm trying to keep up in the chat, and it's amazing. Your wife was not alone, Ali. Everybody's popping off. Several people are popping off in the chat about they were the book report kid too. So
I love that. I'm going to tell my wife that after we're done recording this.
She's not alone. And I see a lot of new names this week, or I think I'm seeing
Yes,
me
too.
So yes, hi Paul, hi Cortina, keep sounding off, and all our regulars too. No, something struck me because when you first said measuring intelligence, I'm like, or intelligence, and I said, well, no, that's kind of broad. We got to get our arms around this, or we'll be here all day because we normally are anyway.
Yeah.
And
where else do we go, Larry? There's nowhere else to go.
Let's figure out the older flagship. No, so you said, well, measuring intelligence, and I liked how you said, well, it's a big topic in mental health and psychology right now, and I'm like, yeah, but is it a big topic in Star Trek? But then we kind of went down a path, and we threw out a lot of examples, and I thought one of them was when we misjudge or we misrepresent or we misjudge intelligence, which is easy. That's a staple of Star Trek.
Yes.
It's like, oh, I'm just stepping on this rock. Hey, I'm alive down here. I'm sorry. Or, oh, look, it's the clouds are going by. Oh, wait, we're not just clouds, buddy. We're having a conversation up here. Do you mind? It's like, oh, that's right. It's actual sentient life. Although Berman hated the word sentient. He banned people from using the word sentient.
Why?
Because he just thought it was an easy word to throw around. He didn't want them using it. Anyway.
Better have inverse tachyon flux beams.
Exactly. So, so that's a staple of Star Trek. Now, you came up with some angles that we're going to get into that were beyond just oh, gosh, I didn't know that was a sentient species. And a lot of them have to do with good old Homo sapiens.
Yes.
So,
I got the 45-degree angles ready for us. I got 90-degree angles.
Absolutely. But what struck me, and here's where I need the lifers to help us out.
Yes.
We were just talking about this on the other side of the room, as they say on Trek FM. We just off the top of my head, and the original series, we're going to start there, but it really struck me how Next Generation seemed to have tons of examples coming thick and fast, and not so many on all the other. And I'm not even talking about the modern shows, not because I hate them, but because they're only these little 10, 12 episode seasons, and they're so busy telling their arc story that they don't have these standalone moments, but there's still some there. And maybe and I don't know about Enterprise a couple, but Voyager is probably my unexplored topic. Anyway, DS9 I think was too busy moving forward after the first couple of seasons. It struck me though, looking at all the seasons on the surface, I could just remember so many more examples in Next Gen. But we'll see. We'll see what everybody comes up with.
I mean, folks have already come up with some stuff that we're going to dive into. And Nathaniel, no, Spock's brain is not one of them that we'll be diving into. But we even have an example.
Talk about enduring intelligence. That would.
We even have an example coming in from a short trek. So, so folks, keep your examples coming in. I am flagging them for in my little comment window, and we'll get back to them.
Keep those cards and letters coming in, folks.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's start with one of the greatest examples of what Larry was just talking about. Hey, look, a rock. No, I'm alive down here.
I'm a mom.
Watch where you're going.
A mom? Yeah. It's a mother, not a monster. Okay.
It's Devil in the Dark.
Devil in the Dark.
Now, this is one of those. You're talking about. It's a Star Trek trope. I'm alive alive here. Hey. This is probably where that trope comes from.
That's the new aggrieved, undiscovered alien voice.
Yeah.
Do you mind? I'm alive down here. Yeah.
So as Glinda says over here, let's talk about the Horta. So this is one of those.
Let's talk about it. Rocks, silicon.
Let's talk about sentient life, because it's the word that is banned in later Star Trek for some reason. So let's talk about this.
Please, let's talk about it.
Measuring intelligence. I hope no one is measuring ours right now, Larry, because it's quickly going down the drain.
It's off the scale the wrong way. Yeah. Okay. I always loved that when Spock would say, "Captain, readings are off the scale," and I always wanted Kirk to go, "Well, then get a bigger scale."
Yeah. I love it, Charlotte's like, "Why is Devil in the Dark suddenly a Monty Python sketch?" I think, Charlotte, usually this happens when Larry and I are tired or sleepy.
The Ministry of Silly Crawls. That's what it is. Okay.
All right. So, in all seriousness, this is
Ex Horta. Okay.
This is a wonderful episode, and there's so much we can there's so much meaning we can get from this episode, Larry. We can talk about it in terms of stereotypes and discrimination. We can talk about it in terms of assumptions. We can talk about it in terms of sentience, and here we're going to also talk about it in terms of intelligence. And
we can talk about it in terms of colonialism and exploitation.
We can also do that. Is that the history professor voice?
It's something. Yes, that's the nerdy, controversial topic that's been around so long. It's new again. Yeah, apparently. Okay.
We could talk about it in terms of all that stuff. And
today,
let's talk about it in terms of intelligence, because one of the assumptions that if you look at, one of these days we'll have this discussion, like, is the Federation a imperialist regime? We can have that discussion, but not today, folks. But if you think about a Federation as this Homo sapiens only club, or Homo sapiens are kind of driving it, there is an assumption that is made throughout Star Trek that other life that looks like us is intelligent. And if it doesn't look like us, it might not be. And that's where some of the greatest episodes that touch on this theme, that's where the clash occurs. Someone who looks very different, speaks very differently, has a very different culture. There's these assumptions made, and those assumptions are challenged. And Devil in the Dark is one of the first great episodes that really does that. And the thing I want to hit on over here...
Breathes different air, yes. Yeah. Metabolizes differently, yes.
Yeah. A crystalline-based, silicon-based life form. But the thing I want to talk about here, I'm dipping a little bit into the counselor's log, but that's okay, Larry. I'm going to dip into it. It's my log, and I can dip into it if I want to. It's my log, Jim.
It's my log, and I'll... Something if I want to.
Narrate forever. I'll have a long discovery soliloquy. It's my log.
Wow, we went totally different directions there. Okay.
Yeah, we did. I don't like those long logs in Discovery. They're very long. They're very long.
Well, it's more like they're dictating their personal memoirs already, rather than giving a log. Yeah. As I walk about the ship, pondering the miracle that we have a new season, but it's a new premiere, so I'm going to pontificate a moment as I walk around the ship and we do pans of all the areas of Discovery that we've not seen very much of in the first season. That's like, yeah, chapter 7 of her memoirs. Not a log entry, but go ahead.
So I'm dipping into my counselor's log here, but this is a problem we might live to see, Larry, when it comes. I don't know if we'll live to see it with alien life, but I think we're probably going to live to see it with artificial intelligence. And the question is,
speeding along.
Yeah, it really is. The question is this life form or organism or programming aware of itself being alive? Does it have that level of intelligence. And when it comes to AI, we're probably going to get to a point where it's going to be very hard to know if AI is self-aware of itself or if it's programmed to be self-aware and is replicating self-awareness. And then at that point, does it matter if it's programmed or if it is? But here in Devil in the Dark, not only do we see that this organism is alive, but we realize that it is a mother that is protecting its young. And that basic idea of that this is actually a life form that is worthy of a higher level of protection because it is more intelligent. That's something that we have to grapple with in many different ways. When does something become worthy of a higher level of protection? There's diversity in that with humans. Do we think cows are worthy of that? Do we think chickens are worthy of that? Do we think apes are worthy of that? Where do we draw the line between intelligence, self-awareness, how close something might be in terms of us humans? Octopus. There's a big debate happening right now about how much more intelligent octopi are than what we thought. And what does that mean? What level of protection does that warrant?
Well, yeah, that's wow. We suddenly we forget the first delayed 20 minutes and the next 20 minutes of rambling. We suddenly went deep and dark here.
Let's go to one of the hardest topics to discuss, Larry.
There was a news story, and the chat will help me out here maybe, but maybe it was the UK. Maybe it was Australia. There was just a debate and some kind of ruling made about more animal testing for cosmetics or something for cosmetics, not even medicine. But there was some decision made nationally in some nation about animal testing for something that supposedly was a human good, but I don't know if it was or not. But no, that whole line is interesting, and it's part of it's generational, and part of it is. It's just, again, new ways of seeing, new ways of looking at life. But yeah, you were talking about in Star Trek terms, and when is a culture worthy of being protected, quarantined or protected or prime directive protection, and when is it no, they're equal to us, we can go bomb them, or they're a threat, we're gonna go bash on them, they're Klingons, they're Romulans, but even they get extended, those kind of protections at times, but I had something to say. That's like on a societal, cultural level, aside from just an individual. I had something bigger to say. I'll stew on it for a second.
Something that I read in college. This is from Stephen J. Gould's "Bully for Brontosaurus." In that book, he talks about animal experimentation, and one of the things he says is we do animal testing in science because of how similar these animals are to us. So whether it's mice, apes, how similar their nervous system is, how much of a shared DNA there is, how much those findings will help us. And yet we justify doing it because of how dissimilar animals are from us, that we can do this experimentation on them. So animal rights, it becomes a very murky area over here. And how can you, on one hand, rationalize the science because of the similarity, but rationalize doing these experiments because of how dissimilar they are? So it's a very I feel like this is a private little war. At the end of the episode.
No, we can get along. Oh wait, you mean the episode? Okay.
Yeah. You and I could get along, but what'll you have me do, Bones? Or no, what are you gonna like? How does it? Damn it, Larry! I forgot the exact quote.
What would you have me do, Bones?
Yeah, what would you have me do, Bones? And then Mr. Scott, beam us up. We're very tired. There's no easy answer here, and at the heart of the issue is really how we define intelligence. We're kind of wired. This is what I think is going to be a big challenge to First Contact, Larry, if it happens. we're really wired to have less empathy for life forms that look very different than us. So insects are a really good example.
Mhm.
The more different a life form is from us, including whether they're vertebrae or not, if they have an exoskeleton like insects do, they look incredibly different than we do, and it is very hard for humans to develop that empathy for
Or
these other
say they're of
species.
a liquid or gaseous nature and not even solid.
Yeah, yeah. Now I feel like we're stumbling when we keep going into those type of life forms. I feel like we're stumbling into a season 2 Lower Decks episode. Like the cow.
Literally stumbling. Ow! Ka-thunk, ka-thunk, ka-thunk. Who left the batleth in the front of the closet? Yeah.
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! So
Season 2. Do you know something I don't, Ollie? What do you what?
hey, I can't. If I did, I can't tell you.
And here I
I
thought you was
don't.
busy from your startup and from moving.
I
Okay.
I don't know anything. There will be.
Are you going to quantify that to season 2 Lower Decks, or is that meant to be universal? But okay.
I've only seen Picard season 2, not Lower Decks.
Oh,
Yeah, Q is in it.
okay.
Yeah, and
After
Brent
you got
Spiner plays another Nunian. So I don't know. I don't know who's playing.
another
Um, moving page 2. Let's move along here, Larry.
page 2. Yes.
You've got an animated series example you wanted to bring up here.
Well, here's the thing. I'm thinking Star Trek trope. Oh, it's just a rock. No, it's smart. But then you said, but what about the way we judge intelligence based on years and
Yes.
our human on that? And
Yeah.
there was a very of all things an animated series, a TAS, the animated series, counterclock incident where it's reversing time and the kids and they de-age and all that. But the point was that, and we finally made it canon. Captain, now Commodore April,
Yes.
is finally seen, and his wife Sarah. But they talk about in the 2360s, there's a mandatory retirement age at Starfleet of 75, which is only 10 years. In 200 years, it only advances 10 years. Which always in the 70s it was radical, but that always threw me that Star Trek time, 200 years only netted 10 more years. And you've got McCoy living to be 137 a century later. So anyway, there's things there to play with. But the upshot of that episode was that they would maybe look at maybe it wasn't time to cast Commodore April aside just because he turns like he's Timothy, right? From the Kalon culture, where when you reach whatever it was 60 or 65 and you're put to death and not even being a burden on society in that
Right.
culture. But in this case, they're going to go back and review, in light of what all happened and how he saved the day. They're going to review the worth of that, mandatory retirement age. Although I secretly go, well, he really wasn't. He saved the day because he was more like 35 again, not 75, under the guise of the de-aging. But still, it's still a good idea. And as you said, the long and the short of it is, here's an animated series episode talking about aging and casting perfectly good workers aside based on an arbitrary age and all that kind of thing. So there's
Yeah.
another example, though, of how do you measure is the intelligence. I guess you're saying, is it merely measured in years? Because that's completely arbitrary.
Yeah, I love this example, Larry, and I
Well,
love
you came
that.
up with it.
Ah, I knew there was a reason why I liked you, Larry.
Mhm.
Keep that flattery coming. Um, I really like this example. Well, I didn't think of this animated series example, but the idea of aging is one I think about a lot. One of the things that
Oh, you didn't. You had the idea of aging,
yes,
and I came up with it.
it was a true life support live miracle, folks. This is when Larry and when our dilithium crystals are fully energized. This is the kind of magic
And
that
our messaging app. Yeah.
yeah. Yes. Um, there are so many assumptions about intelligence and aging, and one of the assumption is that you age and you develop dementia. You age and your thinking gets so slow. You age and you can't learn new skills, and those things are all false. Most people who age Like aging does not mean you develop dementia. Aging does not mean you develop Alzheimer's. Some people have a risk for that, and there's a lot
Hmm.
there's a lot that we're understanding of why that might be, and what creates a genetic risk and also a lifestyle risk for that. Sleep apparently might be one of those things, like making sure we're getting enough sleep. Sleep is really important in cleaning your brain and flushing out all the junk that builds up.
Better hurry. We might not make it out of this episode then.
Shh, shh. Sleep seems to be really important, but just because you're getting older does not mean your intelligence is going to be compromised. So two things tend to happen as we age. So you are a little bit slower on speed-related cognitive tasks. So if I ask you to do certain things very quickly, you're going to be a little bit slower at 75 than you would compared to someone who's 45, compared to someone who's probably 25. However, there is a lot of evidence for psychological wisdom. People who are older, if you were able to kind of map out all of their memories, they have far more connections between their memories than someone who is younger. And we know that people who are older are able to make more connections between different types of experiences than people who are younger. That's the psychological basis of wisdom. It is a real thing that happens. So as you get older, you have way more life experience to draw from that can inform what you are doing and thinking and saying. And if you think about a Starfleet captain who might be 75, and you think about this 23rd, 24th century where medicine has come so far, that's exactly the kind of experience you want on the bridge of a starship, or I don't know, in the Admiralty. We got a lot of badmirals out there, but the combination of
I think the Dadmirals are making a comeback, but go ahead.
The combination of a really experienced officer who has served on many different starships, combined with a first officer who might be a bit younger, that is a winning combination when it comes to Starfleet. It's also a winning combination when it comes to our human teams. Having diversity of age is incredibly important for a number of reasons, and a lot of those myths we have about aging and intelligence are just completely false, Larry. That's why you call them myths.
And a myth is as good as a mile sometimes, unfortunately.
I've never heard that before. Is that an expression?
It's just a play on a miss is as good as a mile.
I've never heard that one either.
You'd never heard a miss is as good as a mile?
No.
It's like if you barely miss something, sometimes you might as well be a mile off as just a small amount off.
Oh,
a miss is as good as a mile. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, a myth is as good as a mile is my stupidism based on that. But anyway, which makes no sense. I'm sorry. I've been actually catching up in the chat here, and people are being awesome.
People are being awesome.
Yes.
Lots of great comments coming in. And folks, yeah, I know this camera setup. It's not perfect. I'm working on it. Things have been
He's still remodeling, remember, everybody?
Yeah, it's not. Things are
Psych
not.
Show Studios 2 is still a work in progress.
It is far from... when we started this show, it was at the tail end of me setting up that set, and it took like 3-4 months for me to set that up. Fortunately, I got to set up before the pandemic hit.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. So it's going to take a little time, folks.
Looks like a 3-hour tour. A
3-hour tour. More references that only 3 people are going to get in our chat. We are nothing if not relevant, Larry. All right, let's move forward. Can we talk about boosting intelligence?
Let's talk about boosting. Yes.
Yeah.
Let's talk about boosting smarts. Let's talk about
Let's talk about Reginald Barclay and all the ways he poses a risk to the Enterprise.
To the nth degree.
To the nth degree. one of the, don't worry, Karen, those pictures are coming back. Anyone who wants to come over and help me set some levels and put up stuff, let me know. Yeah, the nth degree. This is a wonderful Barkley episode, Larry. One of my
This was the
favorites.
first one you popped up with, so yes, as an actual example, this is the
Yes,
first one you
yes,
mentioned.
yes, yes. For many reasons, this episode stuck out for me. So if folks don't remember, this is the Barkley episode where his intelligence gets boosted by an alien race who this is their form of exploration. They bring life forms from different parts of the galaxy to them by enhancing the intelligence of one member of their crew who is able to construct this, like, I don't even know what kind of technology they like. Did they just fold space massively? Is that
I forget exactly what it is, but no, he's in that. To me, it's like he's in the chair with the lasers hitting his head. It's the Cytherians.
I
Yes,
love
yeah.
when Picard talks to the computer and it's Barkley that responds. And then, yes, Captain, it's me. I realize it would be much faster if I just integrate my conscious thoughts into the computer mainframe. And then everyone's like, Barkley!
Broccoli who? He says, yeah. Yeah, no, it was another great Dwight Schultz Broccoli show, but Barkley show. But yeah. And the Cytherian that they finally see, I love how they call that the Oz head. That's a visual effects term. Like if you ever have a big float, like the big head on Third Rock from the Sun,
Oh, yeah.
they call that an Oz head. It all goes back to the Wizard of Oz head that came up to Dorothy and the group. So they
That
call it,
was
the big floating head is called an Oz head. But
that
that
was a
was,
great show. I missed that
yeah.
show, Third Rock from the Sun.
That guy, oh, here's a mini K3. I should have saved this. This would have been awesome. Shocking. So not only is the Cytherian at the end who explains everything to Picard at the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's the story so far, what's happening, and it's that guy talking. He's the human appearance of the alien at Shakari in Star Trek V.
I was wondering about that.
And in a younger day, like 30 years before, that actor KQ, I'd forgotten all this until just now, and it all came streaming back. I guess the Cytherians got
It
to me.
all kept streaming back. Wait, no, that's another song.
Yes, it is. That same guy who you see older there, obviously he's an older actor. When he was younger, he was Newt Kiley in Hooterville on Petticoat Junction and on Green Acres. Just another one of the local. He was like a fourth string local yokel that you saw occasionally when they needed 4 or 5 people actually from Hooterville to be in the scene together.
You know, Larry, Green Acres is the place for me. Fun
Well,
living.
Farmers is the life. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, I just throwing that in there. But yes, so nth degree, Barkley, boosting intelligence. What was the reaction of the rest of the crew? Were people afraid when they saw someone who
Yeah.
boosted their
Well,
level?
it's there's so many reasons why I love this episode.
Aren't you glad I jerked it back to the topic? Okay.
I love it when you're being a jerk, Larry. It's great.
Trying to atone for my earlier sins there. Okay.
A soda jerk would be great right now. I could use more caffeine, even though I'm fully loaded here on the coffee. It's kicking in, Larry. It's kicking
We're fully
in.
loaded on something. Okay.
The thing about how did people react? It reminds me of the first ever science fiction story I ever read, which was Flowers for Algernon. I love that story, and that story is also about boosting intelligence. And I think these kinds of stories, the Lawnmower Man is a lesser good version of the story, but these, and even of Mice and Men, they're tapping into these themes of how do we react to people that are that we identify as being on very different ends of intelligence, very high or very low on these arbitrary scales. Yeah, and Barkley is a character who is he's very anxious, and because of his anxiety, we don't really see often his full capacity of what he can do. And your standard Barkley episode is about him in a problem that only really he can solve, but because of his anxiety, he's getting in the way of himself, and he has to overcome that. That's like every Barkley episode,
Mm-hmm.
right? But this one kind of flips it around. And what I think is cool here is we do have strong reactions to people who very much stick out in terms of the way we define intelligence. Both people who we define as being low on intelligence, that we might not consider them to be as worthy of independence or can belong in our social groups, and then people on who we might define as on the high end. Oftentimes, these are people who also have a difficulty sticking in. They also stick out in other ways. You've got a great DS9 example of this that we're going to get to in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a term that's been newly coined for this, which is twice exceptional. These are people who tend to have high intelligence, but also struggle in some way because of that relationship. So they might have high anxiety, or maybe they are also on the autism spectrum. This actually, let me just put up the episode. Statistical probabilities,
Beyond
right?
the Mel Brooks movie, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So this example is a really good example of twice exceptional individuals. These are people who are genetically engineered to be more intelligent, but along with that intelligence comes a great difficulty.
Great responsibility. No.
Great responsibility. In that episode, oh yeah.
Yeah.
But also what comes along with it is a lot of difficulty socializing and quote unquote fitting in. And I think Nth Degree kind of taps into that as Berkeley. I was going to say Berkeley. As Barkley becomes
You
more...
East Bay people. Yeah.
As Barkley becomes more intelligent, he also becomes more rejected. At first, he's more confident, and people find this Barkley to be very... they really like this version of him. He flirts with Troy, right? And Riker's like, so was he successful? And Troy's like, well, it was a good pass. And Riker's like, no, did you go out with him? And then she just kind of smiles and walks away. Love that. I love
Smiles demurely. Yes.
Marina and Jonathan.
Although if she was actively counseling him, she should never have done it.
No.
Right, dear doctor. Yes,
That's true. That's true. But as to paraphrase Picard, maybe the ethics of the 24th century function a little bit differently. I don't know. That's just a little first contact joke for you. No, he should not have. Or she should not have. But yeah, that's a very long answer to your question, Larry.
I expect it. And I'm one to talk, so we're even. Okay.
Page 3. I think you're the only one who might get that.
Paul Harvey ever have a page 3? I only remember
I don't think so.
page 2. Yeah.
I don't think so.
Only on some stations. Okay. Good day.
Oh my God.
Stand by for news. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
That's almost as old as the early Jeopardy stuff. Okay.
But yeah, Charlotte says here, Barkley is insanely intelligent, but his anxiety is his worst enemy most of the time. So this, Charlotte, you're reminding me of one of the concepts I wanted to explore here, which is about stereotype threat. When a stereotype is activated and we're afraid of fulfilling that stereotype, we actually function worse. So, for example, if you are a woman and you're about to take a math test and you're reminded of the stereotype that women aren't good at math, you actually perform worse there. When we get more anxious and uncomfortable and worried, our ability to function kind of goes down a bit. And we see that with Barkley a lot. His anxiety really impairs his ability to function in these and perform in these different situations. There's the opposite is kind of true as well, and this might be a little bit of a way around this if we're able to remind people that intelligence is more malleable, that it can be changed. It does tend to kind of boost performance a little bit. But this is one of the things. Intelligence, Larry, is a very hard thing to kind of capture, and a lot of stuff can get in the way of it. And here, I wanted to talk a little bit. We don't have an image about this because I did not do a good job in the prep here. But I want to talk about...
It's all your fault.
It is all my fault. I want to talk about two different tests. I want to talk about the Kobayashi Maru, and I want to talk about Wesley Crusher's Starfleet admissions test.
Oh, I sent that one.
You did?
Yeah. There's one of him with the guy in the disaster room.
Is there?
And then,
Larry, okay. You cue it up while I will double check.
Oh, me cue it up?
Yeah.
It's a it's the only 2-shot that I sent that I put together.
What? Okay, you talk and I'm going to check.
Wesley Crusher, which I like this because it kind of echoed back when Troy was taking her command test. They echoed the same kind of sentiment. But, I mean, I thought I did. Let me look at my email to you real fast. Did I not? Oh, my God. I don't think I left it out? Oh, I went to all the trouble to put it
left it out.
I left it out. Buried alive. Buried alive.
Buried alive.
I'm so sorry.
No,
it's
okay. It's okay.
I can. Wesley Crusher's psych. The whole point was he's going through the admission process for the academy remotely, so they're not back at San Francisco. He's able to do it out on the frontier.
Yeah. And
there is a psych test that they're measuring. He's all nervous about it because they're going to come out of nowhere. He's down on the testing center. Relva 7. That's the name of the planet. Yay. It's just a Starfleet. It's just a Starfleet base, and he's not sure. He's trying to get counsel from Riker, and they're like, "Well, you never know. They're going to come out and go, boo, gotcha." He's like, "Oh, I don't know what." It's just be yourself. Be yourself. There you go. There's one. But he's one of them. It's like there's an older, much taller Starfleet guy who's just kind of randomly abusive to him in the moment. And he's like fighting back, or he's afraid, and then his tester pops in and goes, "Oh, see, that was." And he's like, "Oh, wait, that was like the test, yeah." But then later on, he's waiting on the test, and he hears a disaster happening. And what the scene you just showed there, he goes down, he rescues, he has to choose between who he's going to be able to rescue or get over it.
Yeah.
And then he realizes it was all a simulation when they come out and say, "Hey, thanks for rescuing me," and "Hey, don't worry about it. Let me die. It's fine." But it's like a little mini Wrath of Khan there. I mean, a little mini Kobayashi Maru. But it's basically showing you what the kind of thing Starfleet, at least right then, is looking for. It's not just about how many regulations can you memorize.
Yes.
It's about what's your emotional reaction going to be. And what I liked is there's an echo of that later when Troy is taking her command test.
Yes.
And she has this exact same thing, only it's not little Wesley. It's mature Troy. And she's freaked out about it too. And Riker's counseling her and says, and she passes fine by the end.
So I really love, I say this a lot, Larry. I really love this episode.
I'm seeing a pattern forming here. I've seen you loving a lot of these episodes. You should watch more of the series.
Have you tried watching more Star Trek? I love this because of the reason you mentioned. It's a little bit of a throwback to the Kobayashi Maru. I love that this also shows what Starfleet is looking for. I love that what's implicit here is Starfleet is consistently changing the way they do this assessment. And I love that this is a core value that they really care about. They care about how people perform in these kinds of situations. Mm-hmm. So the reason I want to mention this...
So what happened to all those bad admirals?
Yeah, I know.
All the bad admirals, yeah. Okay. Maybe? Where did they go wrong and veer off course? Okay.
The thing about the Admiralty, one of these days we should have a whole episode on the Badmiralty. There's a lot of good admirals out there too. Mm-hmm.
If you want to come back more than once, you got to be a not badmiral.
That's true. Yes.
You be an Admiral Ross or an Admiral Nechayev.
Yes. Yes,
or an Admiral Cornwell. You've got to not be a badmiral.
Right. The badmirals only get one shot.
One shot.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Prove your
Oh my gosh. We're only talking about 500 people, Picard. How many people does it take before it's wrong, Admiral? Uh,
do the math.
oh my gosh.
You're failing your psych test, Admiral.
So let's talk about that psych test. What
Talk about psych and me. Let's talk about
Larry. Let's talk about Larry and Ollie and all the Star Trek psychology. So, what are we
Pitch
doing?
perfect. Pitch perfect.
What are we doing today? Why I like this is, as we see, the best that we see about Star Trek, or about Starfleet, I should say, is they are not so focused on numbers, Larry. They're not focused on achievement tests. Now, in the United States, for a very long time, admission to college has been based on the SAT, the Statistical Aptitude Test, which historically looked at math. What's that?
Or the ACTs.
Or the ACTs. More recently,
what I had,
yeah. More recently, ACTs actually become a bit more popular. And the ACT has looked at more categories, but historically, the SAT just sort of looked at it looked at reading and math, reading abilities, analytical abilities, and sort of computational abilities. The ACTs looks at a few more things.
To me, it was just, in my day, it was the SATs is what the Coast did and the Heartland did ACTs.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, makes sense.
I just the ACT I took. Yeah.
And admission to college in the United States has been largely based on these standardized scores, your grades from high school, maybe your essay, and maybe letters of recommendation. But a lot of colleges have used cutoff scores for these standardized tests. Like, you need to be above this to be really considered. Now, more recently, schools have started to look at applicants in a more comprehensive way. Sometimes that leads to more bias. Sometimes that leads to less bias. But in the last couple of years, especially, and this is one of the changes that has been fast-tracked because of the pandemic, a lot of schools are beginning to drop these standardized tests because, Larry, they're kind of biased. They're very good. The SAT and ACT are very good at measuring how well people have prepped for the SAT and ACT. They're very good at that. And so if you're someone who has more resources, you've gone to more prep classes, you've been at a school that has spent years and years teaching you how to do well at this test, you're going to do very well at this test. But there's huge biases in these tests. They're not...
Right. It's not just about did you get aid for the SAT and how much, but it's also culturally based.
It's also culturally biased, which that's a big thing I'm going to talk about in the
comparing
counselor's law.
contrast mayonnaise and Miracle Whip. Yeah. What?
It's the University of California. I don't know if it's just UC Berkeley or the whole UC system.
I think the whole UC system.
The whole UC system is dropping them, which is huge because that's
because UCLA just was talking about it, what they're going to have coming in down here.
Yeah, my alma mater down there is getting rid of it. Very proud of them. Good show. So it's a big
you
deal.
politically correct people, I swear. Okay.
It's and if we compare that to Starfleet, Larry, Starfleet, from what we've seen, it is the critical measure in Starfleet is not a standardized exam, but it's a performance evaluation. How do you perform in these situations? And what we see from Kirk is divergent thinking, having a creative solution is something that Starfleet really values. So Kirk cheated. He reprogrammed, right? Whether you're in the Kelvin timeline or in the Prime timeline, Kirk took a divergent way of addressing that test. And here we see with Wesley, there's many different things that Wesley could have done in this situation. And this is where I think Starfleet has a much more inclusive assessment process. I'm just bringing in all my counselor's log here. But Larry, one of the things I'm really passionate about is um, understanding that diverse brains have so much to offer teams and organizations. And I think we've started to see a change
Hmm.
here with the autism spectrum. Historically, we thought people who are on the autism spectrum, they can't fit in, they're doomed, over the last few decades, we've seen that
Hmm.
there's the autism spectrum. First off, is a huge spectrum. There's a lot of diversity there, and people who have autistic brains are much more biased towards visual, logical information, which has a huge benefit in many areas of society.
And when you say biased, you mean in not in a non-judgmental way, like a judge. You mean biased as in that's where they
That's where they
grab.
go. In much the
That's where they
same way, yeah.
gravitate.
In much
Right.
the same way that neurotypical people who aren't on the autism spectrum, they're more biased towards the social and verbal. That's our bias. A society that would be structured by people who are on the autism spectrum, there would be a lot more visual, more logical, more predictable things in society. But society is largely biased by people who aren't on the autism spectrum, which makes our society so much more verbal and socially biased. So Starfleet, I think, is a much more inclusive organization because they're not concerned about your numbers. They're concerned about what do you do? Do you have creative ways of approaching this
Hmm.
problem? And there
Hmm.
are many ways to solve this problem. We are less concerned about your outcome as we are concerned about how you're approaching this problem.
And you would think that if a federation is truly multi-species and truly, is about idic, well, it's a Vulcan thing, but if it's been adapted by the Federation, and yes, the production reality of in the 60s or the 80s and 90s is about having bipedal, two-legged, bumpy heads with different colors. I mean, that's great diversity, but I mean, if you really get back to a lot of the novelists in the 70s, and I can't remember which one exactly, but a couple of them tried to make the Horta like some of the babies of Mother Horta, how fast do they grow up? Within 10 or 20 years, there was a time when there was a Horta crew member on the Enterprise. And
Mm-hmm.
what's interesting about, say now, well, Lower Decks, I'm sure is going to go there eventually. And some of the things the Orville tried to do with having way non-humanoid species as crewmen and officers. And I bet Lower Decks is going to get there. We've already kind of had that with the Exocomp ensign a little bit, but that's even that's not even organic. But I'm looking at what Prodigy is going to do now. They're not Starfleet members, but they've got some totally Murph and the Bricker character, but they're showing some really not typical, not bipedal typical
Yeah.
humanoids
Yeah.
that they're but that's the freedom of animation. But if that helps us open up that idea of what typical and what the Federation has embraced, and what people's different abilities. I mean, when you said that, it just there's a link here between the storytelling ability of Star Trek in different eras and animation in the 70s, even what they were
Yes.
able to do with Maress and Erex and others. But as visited aliens, not necessarily. But anyway, but that's going to evolve and change and hopefully grow and be more of a statement to be made
Yeah.
when the storytelling ability expands.
Yeah, and this is something that I want to use this. We should jump into Lower Decks. You got a good example from Lower Decks here, but this is something that I really love about Starfleet, and I think it's such a great way to think about how can we make evaluations of applicants. One of the things that I do love about Silicon Valley is if you look at the way engineers are assessed. Now
Changing things. Oh,
there's a lot of problems with Silicon Valley too, and there's a lot of problems with how engineers are assessed. But one of the cool things about it is it's not an assessment that's based on necessarily like what school you went to or your grades. It's much more an assessment based on performance. So there's these tiers of evaluation. You have to solve a problem on your own to be considered an applicant, and then the interview is much more, you're given a problem and you have to walk the other people through your solution. Anxiety can come up there. Problems can come up there, yes, and those are things we need to overcome. But then the in-person one is very similar, like you have to solve a problem. I see it so similar to how Starfleet has its admissions and entrance exam. The focus is more, excuse me, the focus is more, how are you thinking about it and where do you get to in terms of solving this kind of problem? I love that, and I wish more interviews were about let's just try to understand how you approach these situations, and less about what are your grades, what are your numbers, who do you know, all that kind of stuff is breeds a lot of problems. I want to talk about this Lower Decks episode, Larry. Speaking of animation and the power of animation, let's talk about Cupid's errant arrow.
Which first off, I'm reading the chat. I'm trying to write some down here as we go through it because you have the power of the display. But a lot of you are right there, and people are coming up with some of the good ones in Enterprise and Voyager. And I should say, before I stumbled onto the genetically engineered bunch, they used to have a nickname. I can't remember it now, but before I came to that, I was just going to say playing God in the micro universe. Something as personal as the micro universe in the episode with Dax's incipient Trill initiate, right?
Oh, yeah.
The B plot of that was they came across some, what would they call it, subspace seaweed on one of the runabouts, but the subspace seaweed had a completely contained micro universe.
Yeah.
Or a galaxy anyway. No, a micro universe. Which was like, well, that kind of blew up the scale. But like they were worried about protecting it in the intelligent life there. But anyway, Enterprise having some, and I want to hope we get back to those. But what were we talking about? Sorry,
Lower Decks.
Oh, Lower Decks. And I knew that tucked away, Lower Decks can handle a topic in a quick rejoinder. They're throwing out so much stuff constantly. In fact, one of those throwaways is, there's one of them where mariners, they're comparing, or they're playing, who pity party or something. And there's one point where mariner says something about, oh yeah, I was in a sentient cave for 2 weeks or something, or whatever. And I was actually like, oh, that's right. What do we know about this? And anyway, and apparently Mike had Crusher trapped in a sentient cave in this book, and that was like, I think he had all these jokes that he's pulling out of here one by one to use on Lower Decks, but. No, the one we threw there, but I knew there were lots of examples if we could just stop the tape long enough to find the millions in Lower Decks. But no, this is one that got me, because not only the whole Cupid's errant arrows is about Boimler and his girlfriend, and Mariner can't believe it, and the girl has to be, his girlfriend, who's Starfleet, has to be a clone or an alien succubus or something that's after him, and she's got to protect him, and she thinks the same thing about Mariner, and comes to find out that Boimler's just had this parasite that's given him pheromones or something, and he's attracted. But what's wacky is not only do they yank it for the comedic effect, it's like a little Warner Brothers cartoon bug. And it's not just that they find the parasite in his hair, and that's the reason for the weird behavior. But of course, the little bug has a complete personality, and is don't put me in a jar.
Get me out of here! I'm a sentient life form.
I'm not even a rock, and I have no. But it reminded me that they did it for the comedic effect and for the joke and for the funny voice. But it's totally sentient. He's talking back at them, and they're like, oh, he's like, get me out of this jar, and it just was like, look, here's Lower Decks. Look, they didn't just smash the bug. Now I almost pulled out the one where they're smashing the glowy glob in the corridor like it's nothing in the teaser, which was talking, and it's comedic. But it's a takeoff on the glowing energy vampire blob from Day of the Dove, but a little bit. But she squeezes it down. They kind of stomp it out, which, is not very Horta-like. It's more salt vampiry for laughs. But anyway, there's those kind of examples all through Lower Decks, and while they're there for the joke, they do say something. And in this case, they put him in a jar and in a jar. And I don't know. What did you think? I mean, it was like, oh, that's right. They have it talking to them.
Yeah.
You know,
I think Lower
Universal
Decks.
Translator is working full time here. You know,
What I love about Lower Decks, and you mentioned this about the animated series. Maybe we should start calling it TOAS, the original animated series, because now we're gonna have three of them very soon.
That's 3 letters. We 4 letters. 4 letters.
That's true. That's true.
OAS.
Yeah.
Wait, that's the Organization of American States. We don't need that. Okay.
Isn't the Organization of American States the United States of America? Isn't that the
No,
organization?
that's North and South America.
That's
like RU,
right,
but not really, not as tight as the EU. Yeah.
Well, so what I was going to say about the animated series,
It's like our
here,
NATO. That's what it is. Yeah.
because of the budget limitations of live action, they can do more stories that are about aliens and life forms that look very different from us and are organized and function very different than us. It's very expensive in live action to do that. And there's some great ones, like whatever that episode, what's the silicon-based life form in TNG that we see, Larry? The
TNG.
Yeah, TNG had a silicon-based life. They're like, or crystal. They look kind of like crystals. Blah. Someone in the chat will know.
There were the micro in home soil, the Valarans that were tiny, and that was the point of that show. Was they didn't know they were going to do some experiments on this planet, and they didn't realize that the rocks were alive.
Well, they were a very secretive species that didn't like talking. And then Picard ended up talking to them, and they were like, "We don't want to talk to you." View screen off. No, not jogging animating. Anyways, doesn't matter. What I was just gonna say is it's hard to do those stories in live action.
Shellyak? Oh,
The Shellyak.
Okay. Well, they're on a hollow. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Fine.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
So thank you, Larry. So the Shellyak are a great example of a life form. Those precious little life forms. Boop, boop, boop. Where are you? Is it true, Larry, that scene was improv'd and everyone's reaction was sort of live? Like
the lines weren't, but the song that he did was.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. And Jonathan and Marina's reaction is so priceless in that. That's such a lovely scene.
They're not acting.
Yeah, no, yeah. I love that. Anyways. It's so hard to do those stories about life forms that are very divergent from the way Homo sapiens look like. And it just costs more money. And the reality is, if there is life out there, it's likely that it's not going to look anything like us, that the process of evolution on these other planets would have gone in a very different direction based on the way those other planets work. Carl Sagan has this great response in an interview. I think it was on Tonight Show in relation to his viewing of Star Wars, and he's like, yeah, it's fun, but like, why does everyone look like a white human? Like, that is not how evolution would work.
And the one that doesn't get a medal.
The one that doesn't, yeah. It's a great interview if you haven't seen it. But
you can tell though, it's like 1977, 78, and everybody goes.
Right. Yeah. And in the animated series, Lower Decks, and probably Star Trek Prodigy, which just from the preview alone, it's able to go into these areas that live action just hasn't been able to touch on. So I love that. There's so many other things I want to talk about here, Larry. We would be remiss if we skipped over this. But getting back to DS9.
Okay, yeah, and there were 2 from the other modern shows that I wanted.
Yeah. I want to get to those too. But I want to make sure we don't forget about our Ferengi friends in. Libby said here. I was going to say Rom. Everyone thinks he's stupid, and he's not.
Oh yeah.
Yes. And then also Also, Linda said and Nog. And I wanted to talk about our Ferengi cast members here, or crew members, I should say. We didn't have any Ferengi cast members. We had human cast members. But culture and language has a huge impact on how we measure intelligence and what we find to be intelligent. A lot of the original intelligence tests, and I'll talk about this in the counselor's log if we ever make it to it. A lot of these original...
You have been leaking out a few droplets.
I've been leaking out a lot. My counselor's log is
entries.
very leaky today.
Yeah.
A lot of our early intelligence tests were heavily biased towards the English language and Western, largely white American culture. And if you had more knowledge and exposure to those things, you would do better. And the Ferengi are a great example of this. The Ferengi have massive social intelligence. And just that idea of social intelligence is relatively newer in psychology, that we have these multiple intelligence. It's not just about reading and analytical ability, but it's about spatial intelligence, something dancers and athletes have a lot of. It's also about social intelligence, something you'll find in business, in mental health, in entrepreneurial individuals. You know, these different forms of intelligence, and the Ferengi are so good at understanding the motivations of other people, what they need, how to deliver on those, a lot of those business skills. But they also have a culture that is looked down upon by a lot of people in the Federation, which a lot of the Federation smugness can make them see Ferengi as being less smart, less evolved, lower in status.
It's one of the big losses of Star Trek, that we never had a Ferengi character who could like stand up finally and point that out. Oh, wait, we did. Good on Quark. Yes.
Good on Quark. Always good on Quark.
And you know, Armin loved delivering those because they were like a meta. As much as the Ferengi were they're supposed to be the big bad alien, but their cultural animus was supposed to be a commentary on the greed of the 80s.
Yeah.
And then it winds up 10 years later where they find, in fact, they wasn't on the nose, but in the person of Quark, you finally had commentary about, not so much about the badness of greed, but about, smugness and all the things that Quark would rail about. Oh, you think you're so superior, and you're better than us, but really, and it's a meta critique of the ills of, the materialism or the capitalism of society. But
Lauren, isn't it also canon that the Ferengi do have those extra lobes, that like they do actually have these very complex brains?
They came up with the 4-lobe brain to get around why Troy couldn't sense emotion at times.
Right. And I think all those extra lobes really go towards their social intelligence. Like, think about how amazing it is that this species...
Is this an Ali retcon here?
It's a total Ali retcon. It's a ART, an Ali retcon. How amazing is it, Larry, that the Ferengi developed warp technology by purchasing it? Now, at first, you might be like, oh, well, this means they're actually not intelligent. No. They were able to use
their brain power to something.
Yes, they were able to channel.
Why should I waste my energy on that when I can?
Exactly. They have the massive social intelligence to be able to negotiate this advanced technology for something. Like they were able to figure out, what does this culture need? How can we deliver it to them? Even though they didn't have warp technology, like that requires massive social intelligence. If you think about our the most advanced part of our brain, of our Homo sapien brain, it is the more the cerebral cortex, the frontal lobe, the outermost layer of our brains here. It is more dedicated towards thinking about the future, thinking about the past, regulating our emotions, being able to consider different possibilities. The Ferengi probably have a very advanced version of that, and that allows them to really understand people, their motivations, their desires, their interests in a way that humans can't. And so it's a great example of how culturally biased intelligence is. They have massive social intelligence, but a lot of humans just don't see it.
Well, but between Quark and between young Nog, unless we take the 8th season premiere as canon, he got to be captain. No, that's been the mark that they made on Ferengi for all time, and like Lower Decks. Lower Decks has already parodied that with the
Yes.
playing on the and good for them. Parodied it for the better to make a point.
Yes. Yeah. That's a wonderful episode of Lower Decks. Larry, let's jump through. You had a few other great examples from.
Well, right, and I think of all the times we could show. This is. Yeah, I know. Since I did this, I'm trying to see who it was.
This is Star Trek Enterprise Rogue Planet.
This is Rogue Planet, where there are shape-shifting natives that are being hunted because the hunters that come from a neighboring planet just think, oh, they're just shapeshifters that take on human form, or they look like us and run to be, it's an instinctual response. It's not sentient. And the Enterprise bunch is there to finally say, no, they're coming to us and saying, taking human form and saying, could you please get them to stop hunting us? So it was kind of a simplistic plot using humans as actors, but it kind of gets that point across. But Charlotte early on was talking about some other Enterprise episodes like Cogenitor, where I should have thought of this, where the male and the females have a third gender that helps with reproduction, but they have like no rights.
Right.
They carry the baby and all that, but they're looked down as less than and servile. And the episode with the two humanoid species where one dominates the other, which is kind of a straight ahead story like that. But you're right. There are Charlotte. You're right. There are some Enterprise episodes, and I know there were some Voyagers. I don't think I pulled a Voyager out for you, but I know there are some there.
No, but what you did pull is some from the newer. Yeah. So
the one that comes to mind for me in Discovery is always Si Vis Pacem Parabellum. Got to remember that. But it's the token one about the blue, and it's an emotional intelligence as much as it's an intelligence. But it's like a bio harmonizing. The blue wisps and all the plant life on the planet are disarmingly sentient and intelligent. That one. But the Picard one is is another one. In the middle of the arc of all the, Picard is so much arc driven. Sometimes they had time for but right there in your face, it's like the deborgified Borg, the
XBs.
The XBs, yes. It's like what intelligence there, and looking at the former, the one Romulan, her aunt there, and they get a big lesson about intelligence, but that's like the mentally ill. Like if you take the autism spectrum, but if you clearly have a really hardcore mental health diagnosis of something that's debilitating, and that's a spectrum, I know, but like you would know this, like how are we talking about intelligence there, and what's being affected by the illness, but what's still a core there that, like, if you're trying to treat someone that way, or even see if a medication can help or some other therapy, you got to base that on having some kind of traction, right? Something's got to hold on to something.
I think what's great about the Picard example there and the XB storyline is we often write off people who we think are not intelligent.
Crazy ant in the attic.
Yes. And the thing I keep coming back to time and time again...
International symbol for crazy ant in the attic. Okay.
The thing I keep coming back to time and time again is how much people with different perspectives add value to teams and organizations. Now, diversity is hard, Larry. It is hard to overcome the differences we have in beliefs, in thinking, in things like in tribal differences, in national differences, all of that, yes. But also in in the diversity in our brains and different ways of thinking there, and whether you have ADHD or whether you're on the autism spectrum or whether you have schizophrenia. Diversity is hard. It is hard to get a team of people together who come from different backgrounds, who have brains that work different ways. And if we are able to, this is the great lesson of Star Trek, if we are able to overcome those differences, that diversity makes us a better team. It makes us better equipped to deal with the problems that are facing us. If no one has come across Temple Grandin's work, Temple Grandin is an individual on the autism spectrum who developed new humane ways to slaughter animals because she saw this and said, that doesn't make any sense what we're doing. There's a very different way to do it. And the value of having people who see the world in a different way is enormous. But it's on us to make the world more inclusive and welcoming so that we are able to take advantage of the beautiful diversity that exists out there in the human race. I think that's a great lesson here of IDIC. Maybe that's a great way for us to transition to the counselor's log here.
Yes.
Larry, I'm going to do a combined counselor's log as well as an away mission because I want to make sure we have time to get to.
Because the counselor's log is where you offer some real world insights here for the topic, and the away mission is where you give a little assignment to everybody, challenge in daily life to bring it to bear.
Yeah, and what I want to talk, and I want to go through it quickly so that we also have time for the K3, because I saw your image for K3 and I have no idea where you're going.
You have no
here.
idea.
I have no idea, so I'm very interested, and we've got some great comments that we want to make sure we get to as well.
Yes,
but we've been talking about intelligence and how to measure intelligence, and I think it's really important to look back at where did our first IQ test come from. And our first IQ test, the Stanford Binet test is a good example of one of the first tests. If you look back at the context at where IQ testing emerged, IQ the shorthand for intelligence, it happened at the turn of the century in the early 1900s. And the ideas that informed early IQ testing, Larry, come from a very not so great place. It comes from what we now regard as scientific racism. Someone mentioned this in the chat earlier, and I know this is something as a history person, Larry, this is something you're very aware of. But Nathaniel was kind of talking about this earlier, about how a lot of these things, a lot of differences in intelligence, quote unquote differences in intelligence, were used as rationale for slavery. And scientific racism has its roots in that, in these ideas that existed in the 1600s, 1700s.
Measuring skull diameter for brain size and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, all of these
survived in the 20th century.
The phrenology, that's phrenology. All of these how science was used to rationalize and back up and defend a lot of discriminatory, racist ways in which society was set up. Psychology is very much guilty of this as well. A lot of biology was guilty of this. A lot of fields in the 1800s and the 1900s, the theories came out of what was just accepted as racist ideas.
Blinders, yes.
Yeah, and the early IQ testing was really used as a way of justifying in the United States how much more advanced white men were. One of my favorite examples of this, Larry, is there was an early study that was published that found that white men had faster cognitive ability than non-whites. And that was used as rationale for higher intelligence of white men. Now, a few decades later, another study found the opposite, that white men were slower in response to these non-whites. And the rationale there was white men are superior in intelligence because they don't react as quickly. They're more reflective. They stop and think before they react. And these non-whites are more animalistic. They're more impulsive.
More primal.
More primal. And I love that the discrepancy there because it shows how much scientific racism was a part of these early tests. And these early tests were so culturally biased. They were so language biased. And they were used for very nefarious purposes. They were used to determine who should be in advanced classes. They were used to determine who should get what slots in the army. And guess what? People who ranked as more intelligent got the less dangerous positions in the military. So this is kind of the legacy of this. And Larry, this is a very tragic story that has kept repeating itself in psychology. How much IQ tests have been used to say race differences, to say gender differences. Every now and then you'll hear the story again about a famous professor at a famous university who is saying that men are superior or this group is superior. This keeps coming up, and its legacy has its roots in a very, very tragic time. And it's only recently that in the past few decades where we've started to expand.
Right.
Yeah, we've started to say like, hey, folks, hold on. We're looking at intelligence in a very narrow way. It's a very biased way. There are actually multiple intelligences. And recent research has shown us that intelligence can actually change. The more schooling you get, guess what, folks? The more intelligent you become. There's value to people whose brains operate differently, whether it's autism, whether it's ADHD. There is a different intelligence we can look at in different cultures, like what we were talking about, the Ferengi. So that's the legacy here. And what I want to, the bottom line message here that I had for the away mission is that intelligence is a malleable thing. What we thought of as being something that's fixed, it's not. And Larry, there are some things that we can all do that can keep us mentally sharp as we age. There's some very specific things, and it's not playing those.
Oh, that's right. I'd forgotten all about this.
It's not about like playing those brain games on your phone. It's not about that. There's some very simple things that we can do. We know that having a complex job where you have to keep learning and improving keeps your brain sharp. There's someone mentioned here in the comments about skilled labor. Charlotte was talking about trades and seeing fridge repair people come in and just being so fascinated by how they work. There's a huge value in apprenticeship of trades, Larry, because whatever trade you're in, you spend your lifetime improving, getting better at, and as new technology comes along, you have to keep learning. There's huge value in boosting your intelligence when you're investing in a job that where you have to keep learning.
Continuing educate teachers, attorneys, doctors.
Yes,
hopefully are keeping up with new frontiers.
Auto repair. Carpentry, any job where you have to keep learning, it's going to keep you sharp, and you're going to age. Your mind is going to age very well when it
entrepreneurs in a digital age when they keep coming up with a new damn app to go, make some faster, quicker. Yes,
and it's not just these things are hard to learn, and at the same time, this is what your brain loves. Learning new things. It is so good for it is the food that keeps your brain sharp is a new novel task, a new situation. That challenge that you feel in your head, that struggle, that is you working out your brain. It is so good for your brain. This is why the benefits of learning a musical instrument and committing yourself to something that you're improving over the course of your life. It is so good for your brain. Going back to school at a later age, putting yourself in a new situation, being in a new culture, being in a new environment. Larry, these are the kind of things that really push us. I would say all the things that we had to learn about launching this show, these things are so good for your brain. So if you want to boost your intelligence, invest in learning new things, put yourself in new situations, and force yourself to have to overcome some of the challenges of learning a new skill. That's what will really keep you sharp as you age. Larry, that's all I got to say here.
Well, is that the away mission? Is
That's the away mission, yeah. So I would say
go out, learn something new.
Yeah. Put yourself in a situation where you have to refine your skill, learn a new skill, or you are put into an uncomfortable learning in situation where you're really having to stretch yourself. That's what's going to keep your mind aging well and keeping your intelligence up.
Mm-hmm.
K3 factor, Larry. What do you got for us? What's the
Well,
deep
I'm going to
dive?
have a very simple K3, and you showed it there. For everybody that's new to K3, it's the only canon thing we could find in the original series there on McCoy's bio bed, but right there alongside temperature and heartbeat and all that, there was a brain activity monitor. So the K3 factor, as you just heard Ollie do a deep dive here on some of his fields, application to our theme. So the K3 is just deep diving Star Trek behind the scenes, though. We've been talking about all the episodic plots. Yay. Okay. I guess some people like Star Trek for that. Plots, characters, shipping, themes, morality. No, for everybody who loves the behind the scenes and how it affects what's going on the outside front. Here's a case, cut to the chase, next generation era. This whole talking about intelligence and what works. We were talking about people who are who talking about college and higher education and continuing education is a great doorway to more intelligence. It is, but that's not the end all be all. And a couple of people were making the famous absent-minded professor kind of thing. Some people, the more education they have, they're not wiser. They just have more book smarts. That old trope,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And and my hero Will Rogers said, "There's nothing as stupid as an educated man if you get him off the thing he was educated in." Which is pretty, that's my Will.
That's great.
Cut to the chase. But in Star Trek, there's one case I was like, how do I apply this? Because everybody that worked on Star Trek was pretty bright. They, had lots, and some were writers and some were artisans and designer craftsmen and all that. But some were good Ferengis and got the show distributed out to the right markets and gave it a future. But here's one case talking about differential intelligence in a very different kind of way, and it just popped in my head, so I'm going to say it. And this never gets talked about. And then I found a picture of this guy. So the photo that I sent you is a guy that probably no one knows his name, but his name, can you pop it up?
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. This gentleman's name is Frank Abatamarco. And he came to the Next Generation writing staff at the beginning of the, I want to say fifth or sixth season. And he came in with some writing credit. He wasn't like an award-winning writer, but he had worked on, he had several writing credits. Equal Justice, he'd worked on the revived Mission Impossible, the new Mike Hammer. Anyway, he came, he knew Jerry and he knew Mike Pillar, and he came in with, and he loved Star Trek, and he was coming in and he wanted to do a show about torture. And the only way you might know his name is you see him as a credit on Chain of Command. Yeah. Right? The famous Picard torture show.
There are 4 lights.
Yes. He really wanted to make a good old Star Trek morality show about torture, which is what happened, right?
Yes.
The reality, though, is, and I'll never forget hearing Jerry Taylor's words talking about this. He came in with all the best intentions, but as they said, especially in the Next Generation days, before a whole generation had grown up on Star Trek, it was so hard to get people to play in Gene's sandbox. And the original series had a horrible time with Gene and Gene Kuhn and the one token showrunner writer that was underneath Gene. They had a horrible time between sci-fi writers who couldn't do TV because they were so all over the place, like Ted Sturgeon, and then TV writers who could craft a script but couldn't get the tropes of Star Trek. Like, you can't have them just fall into a brawl every 2 seconds, right?
Right.
You couldn't just go to the standard Western or cop drama thing. It had to be a Star Trek twist.
Yeah.
And they hated being rewritten. So on one hand, you got TV hacks that hated being rewritten and improved, and you had sci-fi writers who hated being wrangled in. And Next Generation, I mean, that's the dilemma of Star Trek. It's always been very specific and hard in the industry for people to get onto.
Yeah.
Finally, you had the Ron Moores and the Renees and all of that bunch that came up and knew sci-fi. Well,
they knew Star Trek. They
knew Star Trek, and they were learning the craft of writing. And you had enough of a fan movement that knew Star Trek, and then now sci-fi. And it's not a weird thing on TV anymore. It's not an oddball, hard to write trope. And people, the guys used to be, and girls, but mainly guys, used to be worried. It was hard for a Star Trek to end and go out and work because the industry would go, oh, well, you can write a Star Trek, but can you just write an ordinary cop or doctor show, or a family drama? It was so specialized, it was almost a damnation. Well, here's Frank Abatamarco, who comes in as a well-known writer that Jerry and Michael both loved. He's got his first thing he wants to get on. He works on the show. He's a staff. He's got a production. He's got a staff job. He's a supervising producer. He's not an entry-level writer. He's got a producer credit above the line, and he only lasts 13 weeks. He works on his show, but he can't bring his chain of command over the finish line. The other names you see on it have to come in and get it over the line. That's his only credit. He never had another story. He never worked on another script. And he still was respected, and he still worked, but he's a case of all of the showrunners over time. The people that got famous with Star Trek, like Ron, like Renee, like Brian Fuller, and then went on and did other things. Jerry and Michael used to talk about how it took a specific mindset and a specific Frank Abatamarco is a case where someone came in, perfectly good writer, many other credits, and just could not hack Star Trek. And that's a tiny microscopic example of what we've been talking about here, I think, which is, I don't know, selective intelligence. Like, you could be fine in your culture back home, but you can't make it here. Or you can be fine in your college town thing, but you go to the, whatever. Joel Fleischman in Northern Exposure, or Oliver Wendell Holmes in Green Acres. I mean, the fish out of water kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I don't know if this is anywhere near what you're talking about, but it struck me that there's a perfectly intelligent person who is good at his craft, except for this narrowly defined success band that he had to be in. And he's not a failure. He didn't crack the nut of Star Trek, but he's obviously an intelligent and a well credited writer. Yeah. So I don't know if that's too fine a point or whatever, but looking behind the scenes for our topic today was kind of a narrow band to begin with. So yeah.
No, I think that's a good. It's a good one.
And it happens in real life. Sometimes
this happens all the time in real life. Yeah. All the time in real life. This is one of those things where, someone, their resume might look completely perfect, but something doesn't click with the team, and sometimes things are just not working. It kind of reminds me of the Ron Moore coming to Voyager example that you gave me. That's not about intelligences, but it was about different cultural expectations about how to tell these stories, and there being some clash over there about how to do it.
Well, it was also about emotional and political manipulation of people, but
there's that too. And I think our responsibilities, if we're in charge of these teams, is making it as inclusive and welcoming as a place as possible, and seeing, is this a bad fit, or are we making it a bad fit? You know what I mean? So that's a great example, Larry. Not one I would have thought of, and one of the most popular episodes of Star Trek.
Yeah, I knew that was going to be, as long as I was in the realm of our theme today for your. Like I said, I was a little wobbly on the parameter, like what directions are we going to push this, and we pushed it in several directions today, which has been good to. Which I guess is your point. That's what you wanted to do.
That's what I wanted to do. I'm glad.
So I surprised you again.
You surprised? Yeah. Oh, not ish. Yeah. This is not what I was expecting. Let's open up those hailing frequencies, Larry. There's some
lots of great stuff.
Yes. So one that I completely did not think of was Tim's comment: the trouble with Edward, how not to measure intelligence. So this is a short Trek episode. We know not everyone
It's
has
less
access.
not quite working with the team or any team.
Yeah, yeah. So this is an
Which is actually another comment on Barclay, because Barclay had been failing at finding teams to work with and was about to do the same thing on the Enterprise until he found a groove bit by bit by bit, season by season.
And I love Picard in that first Barclay episode because his senior staff is saying we can't work with this guy.
Yeah.
You know, like he just shows up late. He's not on top of it. And Riker's like, I'll bring this up with the captain, and the captain's like, no, listen to him, figure out what's wrong, and let's overcome.
Find a way.
You know?
Yes.
And
make it so.
I'll never forget season 1. I did forget what episode. It might have been the first holodeck episode, but Picard talks about how he's such a bad speller that he doesn't spell very well. And I'll never forget that because when I first saw this episode, I was thinking, Picard? Like, he's bad at spelling? You know, the captain of the flagship of the Enterprise is not good at this. It was so validating to me, Larry, because I'm bad at spelling. I grew up with the spell check. I have typed up. I was in my family was kind of living in Silicon Valley, early adapters of technology. I've typed up everything since like the 4th grade. So my spelling is pretty bad because I've relied on spell check. But if you think about Picard and the life he's lived a life that is largely voice interaction. So you don't need to be good at spelling if you're largely dictating. And
or a grape grower.
Right, or growing grapes, yeah, if that's your trade. And so I think part of that, Picard being someone who has struggled with something that maybe other people are very good at, sees in Barclay that, look, he's got some challenge. It's on us to make it welcoming and inclusive and to figure this out. Because if we can, Barclay is going to have a huge contribution to the team. And when we think about the trouble with Edward, there's a failure here to really involve this person into the team, and it has huge consequences. It has Jurassic Park level hubris consequences here. So I didn't think of going that deep into the trouble with Edward, but there's a lot there to say about why it's so important for us to make inclusive, welcoming teams. So great example, Tim.
Do you think Trouble with Edward went too far that direction for Star Trek, like just having everyone dump on him and then having him eaten by manic tribbles? I'm just curious. It's only 15 minutes, so it makes
probably.
It gets a lot of people are like, no, that's not what Star Trek should have done with this. Like he should have been redeemed somehow. He should have found a way. He's troubled. This is not, what was it a bad blow for exactly what we're talking about here? Finding a way to make a team for everyone that has gifts. Because he obviously had intelligence. He was obviously a researcher. He had just been dropped on his head once or twice. Oh, that's a layman explanation for it.
Maybe. I've only seen it once, and it's been a long time.
So I guess I'm asking, what was your gut reaction to just the whole tone and vibe and direction of this little short story?
Honestly, Larry, I don't remember.
It's been so long. Okay. Well, it's been, 2 years? It's but you just told me something.
It's been a long 2 years.
Getting from there to here. If that had really riled you up, you would have remembered it. So I guess that's the answer. It didn't make you mad and angry in the moment. So then
no, I'm okay with it.
I know some people were really angry about the way, it was like he was the butt of a joke. It was like he was the dark side of the Barclay.
Larry, it's like I've always said, texture, not trivia. I'm okay with these things. Tim asked a very specific question here.
I would have put that on a T-shirt.
Yeah, and that I would have put it on a T-shirt at TeePublic. Tim asked, is it dyslexia or not just good at spelling? Tim, dyslexia is largely a problem related to reading. And what we see with Picard is it's less about the receptive part. It's more a problem of the productive part of writing, not the productive part of speech. And so that's what a good neuropsychologist, if people are struggling in some way, they can pick apart all these things. Is it attention? Is it memory? Is it about receiving, receptive? Is it about producing? Is it about producing speech? Is it about producing writing? All those things are really different, different pathways, different problems, and a good neuropsychologist can pinpoint these different things. Larry, Rose mentioned Khan, and also we had another person.
Superior intellect.
Yeah.
Somebody mentioned specifically, yes.
Dwight mentioned the augments. And so what I want to mention about these, and we mentioned genetic engineering with statistical probabilities in Deep Space Nine, but the cool storyline with the augments is they don't see themselves like Homo sapiens. They see themselves more as Homo superior, to borrow from Magneto in the X-Men world. They see themselves as different. And the moment we start to see ourselves as being more or see other people as lesser than, it's easy to dehumanize them. It's easy to justify inhumane actions.
Because they dared to think of themselves as gods.
What is that a reference to?
That's Sargon talking in Return to Tomorrow. He's talking about the hubris of his race.
Yes.
And I can't believe I just pulled that out of my butt, but I did.
Hey, you are very good at pulling things out of there. And Linda says the forced sterilization of people deemed not worthy of procreating. You know, one of the states that had forced sterilization on the laws was until very recently was California. I think until the late 70s or early 80s.
This is mentally ill patients in state institutions, right?
Yeah, which
especially women,
which often happen to be women of color and minority groups. And so we've got a long history of deeming people as lesser than and justifying really inhumane things. And the augments are a good example of that. They see themselves as superior, so that that kind of led to World War III. So
a little thing like that. Nathaniel brought up this. I'm going way back. This is things I've been noting through. Nathaniel mentioned Errand of Mercy on a cultural level, and the automatic, but Klingons and Federation both but that's exactly why the Organians were masking as something that looked medieval to their eyes, that it was less than. Misjudging that. Charlotte mentioned George and Gracie, the whales.
Yeah, I was just going to say. Yeah, Steve mentioned Star Trek 4 as well, and I don't know why we didn't bring up that example. That is probably the best example from the movies. That Spock has that great line about like human hubris would.
He mind melds with them. Yeah.
What's the line, Larry? It's very human to think that a message of intelligence would be only meant for you, or something like that. Yeah, he's got that wonderful line there that I completely butchered.
Clayton mentions, and now Lord X has brought this back to fore, the Packlids.
Yes. Yeah.
Culturally thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, he says they look slow and stupid. They don't seem to know how their own ship works, but they're more dangerous than you think. And I think that the Packlids are this example.
We're not coordinating. This is like, what, 2 or 3 that I've had on my list, and you had time.
I had on my list too. Yeah, absolutely. But Charlotte mentioned that I'm descendant from tradespeople, blacksmiths, tinsmiths, plumbers. Within a few generations, they were engineers, but we still need plumbers. There's so much value in these apprenticeship models, Larry, and it kind of bums me out that we've moved so far away from apprenticeship models where people are really dedicating their lives to mastering a trade, and we've kind of made these assumptions that college degrees and these more liberal arts degrees are what is really intelligent. No, we need all types of people here, and the trades keep showing how valuable they are. It's a great way to keep your mind sharp, is to dedicate yourself to a trade.
Especially as we have an ever increasing dependence on technology and mechanics and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Charlotte had a comment. In the South, we don't put our quote crazy relatives in the attic. We put them out on the porch and serve them iced tea. And
I
so
was
one
gonna
of the
say, we vote them into office. Oh no,
you said it, not me, Larry.
Okay.
One of the things that I remember coming across research about people with schizophrenia, bipolar depression, tend to do better in other cultures than they do in the United States. And one of the rationales there of that finding was in many other cultures, we don't institutionalize people who have what we deem as severe mental illness or low intellectual ability, that they're still involved in culture, they're still involved in society. And surprise, surprise, the more you involve people in society, the better they seem to do over the long term. So thank you for that
Socialize
comment.
intellectually speaking. Yeah. Galinda mentioned there's a YouTube show where, and I don't know how much, hopefully this is being done responsibly, but basically the gist of it is they go into remote villages. I don't know if that means like Aboriginal or what, but they go into remote villages and show them modern technology just to see their reactions and how they react to it, which I don't know what the title is, but anyway, that was. So I hope that's being done responsibly and it's not like a goofy, sideshow kind of moment. But anyway, and then Nathaniel brought up the whole thing of how the trill work and it's emotional and intellectual intelligence between the symbiote and the host and how it shifts and who's bonding and imprinting on who. And, which was can be a whole side. It's the alien angle of things, but I don't know, maybe there's a real world correlation to that. And before I forget, I wanted to ask you, because we talk about a lot of this about being neurotypical and not, and the gifts of those who aren't neurotypical, and sometimes even gifts beyond anything. But I go back to A Beautiful Mind. Was that a responsibly done movie because it had such a big, wide impact? Like I remember it.
Yeah, that's
And the message, or were there inaccuracies there that?
yeah. So there's I think A Beautiful Mind is probably a net positive in demystifying some of the experiences of someone who might have schizophrenia, and also showing that just because you might struggle with a certain problem like that doesn't mean you can't make a contribution to society. A Beautiful Mind did, I think John Nash experience more auditory hallucinations than visual ones. So he heard more things than he saw. But that, that's a classic movie problem, is show don't tell, and it's more dramatized if it's a visual representation.
Impressed.
So yeah, it got that wrong. It also left out aspects of his sexuality, I believe, and other aspects of his identity. But I think overall, it was a net positive. I think Hollywood does have this bias, though, towards telling stories of these incredibly exceptional people who make these incredibly exceptional contributions to society. One of my favorite people who have schizophrenia on YouTube is, oh my gosh, Rachel Starr. Rachel Starr, she's a stunt person in TV and films who also has schizophrenia, and YouTube's about it. And one of the things I learned from her is one of the best coping skills she has is having her dog nearby, because if she sees something coming out of the wall and is scared by it, but her dog is not reacting to it, she knows, oh, this is my schizophrenia. This is not actually happening. And so
it's her canary in the coal mine.
A bit, yeah, exactly. And so we need to hear more stories from people like Rachel Starr, like everyday stories about how to cope with this thing. John Nash and A Beautiful Mind is more of an outlier there, of the individual who sort of developed game theory. One more comment that came, a couple more comments. So Nathaniel had a question about emotional control and intelligence, and this gets to emotional intelligence. Understanding what emotions you are experiencing what they are, what they need, how to cope with them, what emotions other people are experiencing. That's emotional intelligence, and it's something that can be improved over time. Some people are naturally better at it, but there's always room for improvement. And then both Charlotte and Tim mentioned that, as Spock points out, Khan may be more intelligent, but he's unfamiliar with their technology, which gives Kirk and his crew the upper hand. Tim said that as well. Khan thinks in such two-dimensional thinking, unlike the Borg Queen, who thinks in much more four dimensions of space and time there. But that's a good example of, we so value this, we so have this belief in this like raw intelligence. And it's not just about your hardware, but it's about your life experience and what you've learned. And that is always something that can be improved. And there's always contributions that people have based on their life experience, Larry. A great lesson there to get back to Wrath of Khan.
Okay. I had just wondered, since we've been on this atypical intelligence and who's judging and who's deciding and who's measuring. Yes. I'm sorry. I'm scanning the end of the chat here and seeing, I think I've gone through most of,
just want to give a shout out to Nicholas, who says hello from Manteca Comic Con from Nick and Melanie Jean Mayfield. Hello, Nicholas. Good to have you here, and hello to Manteca Comic Con.
He's channeling for Melanie, I guess. They're there. Yeah. Manteca. That's in California, I think. Yeah. Well, intelligence, measuring intelligence, this shifting COVID situation. There's a lot of us who are going to Vegas that are wondering the shifting numbers and if we're applying our intelligence correctly about how to deal with it, or I'm stretching the theme today, but that's what's upper mind for a lot of people right now.
I know, and this is one of those things where you can be the most quote-unquote intelligent person, but there is a difference between making an intelligent decision and a wise decision here, where it's you're drawing from experience. And it's hard to make wise decisions in the middle of a rapidly developing pandemic, Larry. I don't know what decisions can be made about the official Star Trek Con and Las Vegas and all of these variables. There's no right decision to be made. It's a very difficult situation to be in. Well, Larry, with that, I'm going to get the quote-unquote sad music here started. The going away music, I should say.
We made up our 20 minutes, so.
We really did here.
Yeah.
So, Larry, where can people find more from Trekland this week?
Well, they can find it at LarryNemecek.com is the hub. We'll be back on Tuesdays live, Trekland Tuesdays live at 1 Pacific, 4 Eastern, 9 UK time on Tuesday. And then the Tuesdays also when the Trek Files drops. We've got some great guests coming this week, so check that out from Roddenberry Podcasts. If all goes well and we're watching reports daily, I should be at Trek Vegas, as we just mentioned, here in just a couple of weeks. And that's going to be an interesting, if we're fully masked and all that. But check everything out online at Larry Nemecek on Twitter, Larry Nemecek's Trekland on Facebook and on Instagram.
Yeah, folks. I am at Ollie Mattu on all the socials. I've been a bit busy with work, Larry, so I'm a bit behind on the Psych Show. But if you go to youtube.com/The Psych Show, you'll see all my videos about psychology and mental health and making things fun and easy to understand.
But you have a Discord channel.
I do have a Discord channel, which I need to kind of plug back into, but you can also join the Psyche, our community on Discord. And yeah, Larry, we've got new Star Trek coming up soon. The Lower Decks is starting season 2
on August 12th.
Yeah, on August 12th, which is just about 2 weeks away. So let us know, folks, what topic you'd like us to cover next week. As Lower Decks comes back online, we're going to do what we did last year, which is take inspiration from that week's episode without going into any spoilers, diving into a topic that explores it in more detail. But let us know in the comments, what do you want us to tackle? We had a great poll on our Facebook group a few weeks ago. Maybe we'll dive back into that poll and see.
And we haven't talked about this, but I think we kind of did. I don't know any way we can do the show during Vegas week, assuming Vegas happens.
Yep.
So I think we're going to have to take, and not a fill. We won't have a fill-in either.
No, we'll be on hiatus during that time.
Maybe Jared wants to host a Zoom. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but we had a last time we took a week off. There was a Zoom meetup for those who wanted to share the time and not get out of habit of being here with us at 10 Pacific on Saturdays. But I can tell you up front that we won't have a show. Would that be the 14th, 2 days after that premiere? Yeah. So we maybe will have to tackle 2 themes the next week from Lower Decks or whatever.
And speaking of Jared and Scott, thank you to both of them for helping out with the show. Jared with moderating and a lot of our visuals and our text, and Scott for editing our podcast as well as moderating. Yep. And until next time, Larry, live long and prosper, my friends.
We're there, everybody. Truck well.